Okay. I think that we are streaming. And so, let's jump into this world. This is Hellmare Nightscape, Mysterio 1870, bringing you some communism and some Minecraftism. It is storming really bad outside where I live right now. I lost internet for a little while earlier, and so this could go disastrously wrong at any moment. I also have a, oops, I guess my phone is on as well. I also have that was an alert, from the weather service saying you're going to die soon, so hopefully that won't happen. Um, I also still have a video loading to YouTube in the background of my computer, so it may be messing up my overall computer performance. I thought it would be done by now, but it doesn't seem to be. So maybe that's a mistake, and I'll wind up just having to delete this video here. But I don't really care about any of that. So the protocol that I'm kind of running with for these streams involve two parts. The first thing is I kind of like to just give you a little bit of a look at what's going on in the Minecraft world, and talk a little bit about what I'm trying to do inside this video game, because that is part of the stream, even though it's not really the more important part. And so you can see, well, I'll talk about that in a second. And then the other thing, obviously, is I want to talk about whatever's on my mind, which usually is something political, although it may not always be that. I like other things too, so maybe from time to time I will talk about movies or boxing or sports or literature or philosophy, which is probably the thing I enjoy the most. And some of that obviously will overlap with politics. So on that, with that in mind, you can see I've added a little bit on to the house here. I still have some. This is driving me nuts because I haven't finished it. Maybe I'll finish it during the stream. These corners need to be fleshed out at the top. See how I've done them here so that they don't look like absolute garbage. But I did add a lot of. I finished off the roof basically. I added those new copper lightning rods. They look really ugly, so maybe I'll figure out if I could just put one in the center of the building. See, I have three of them. I don't like the way they look at all, so I may get up there and change that. But I do think I don't have weather turned off or whatever. So if there's a storm, the building could get struck by lightning and get destroyed. So I'm trying to avoid that. Maybe if I just put one tower right in the middle, that'll be sufficient. I haven't done any research on it. I don't even know if it's overkill. Maybe I don't need it. But I finished off the rest of the roof, and I'm okay with how it looks. And well, like I said, I want to finish off those corners. But that's really burying the lead, because I did spend some time in between streams doing the stuff that actually matters inside this Minecraft world. So you can see that bad boy right there, right? That's a pretty good thing to have. Got it. Oops, I don't want to throw that out. That's what I want to throw out so we can look at it and see how cool it is. And of course, the other major thing is this, which I have up to level 30. I don't want Unbreaking. I desperately want Fortune, Fortune 3 on this pickaxe, so I can go get more diamonds. But that's a big improvement. I had to get that obsidian, obviously, and I had to kill a bunch of cows in order to get all this leather. But this enchanting setup is ready to go now, and my first diamond equipment is here. And I did a little bit of moving around, just throwing stuff in different places here. So I can go down into the mines today, or I can even try to gain a few levels. I have some lapis here, so I can actually try an enchantment, but I may have to unenchant it if it doesn't give me what I want. I desperately want fortune, and I don't want anything else. And I'd kind of like to get fortune before I go get any more diamonds. You know the drill. So let's see. I could take a risk here and just see what it gives me. Or I could, just enchant something else in the meanwhile. I think I'll just take a risk. We'll see. Maybe it'll give me something good. If not, I'll just unenchant it. I don't really care. Just Unbreaking. So that's a bummer. But I can also go down into the mines and maybe just get enough for one more pickaxe down there. And then the other thing I want to do Hey, you Death Leopards, just came into the chat. Glad to see you. You see what's going on here, right? A little diamond action, and you saw my enchanting set up. So I've made some progress, which is good. Did a little bit of decorating, did a little bit of finishing on the outside of the house, but desperately need to finish off these corners. But today I can kind of spam the breeding of these cows and sheep, etc., and do some intermittent farming to gain some levels, so I can try another reroll on this pickaxe here. Or I could just go down into the mines, which is a little bit boring, but I can at least show what's going on down there. Do I have any? I don't have any coal handy. I need some torches before I go down there, I think. But I could go down there and run around a little bit to, hey, food, to maybe see if I can find some more diamonds. I already found some exposed, but I was hoping to get fortune first. So that's all of the Minecraft stuff. Then, this is a keepsake. That's my first little pick of the world. Then, in addition to that, the other thing that I want to do is talk about some stuff. And I thought it might be nice to maybe recap just a little bit of the themes or topics that I've spent some time talking about up to this point, to give me a bit of a jumping off point to talk about some other stuff. And of course, anyone in chat, including Death Leopards, obviously, if you have something in particular that you think is worth discussing, I am all ears. What I'd like to avoid, I think I've said this several times, is just responding to other streamers, podcasters, YouTubers. I think that's kind of pernicious. I think it's unavoidable in some small degree. I think it's worth reflecting on why that sort of it's not really an echo chamber, it's just like a feedback loop. That's probably a better way to put it. Why that feedback loop is the primary model that you see for, I wonder what the hell, every time I run past here, there's mobs groaning and shit. I probably should go investigate. But every time you turn on a YouTube video, it seems to be a YouTube video about another YouTube video about a streamer who's responding to a YouTube video. And so the sort of idea of a copy of a copy of a copy, right? Who is it? Baudrillard's idea of the simulacra. If I have the right, post-structuralist French philosopher there, is hard to sort of avoid. So should I take these? Oops, I don't know. I just randomly use this, honestly. I could get another pickaxe, or I could get an axe, honestly, but I sure do want fortune. I'm ambivalent. I'll leave that for right now. In any event, the idea that one underlying event can just sort of circulate and recirculate and pass itself off as something new, I find really sort of troubling. I see why people do it. It's to get clicks, right? And I also think a bit of it is probably necessary. Although I should also admit that what I'm doing is just another way, I mean, obviously, it's just another way to respond to the sort of Voshification of online spaces, right? Like for example, watched a video by this Jackson Hinkle guy who I don't really know. I mean, I don't know, obviously, but I'm not familiar with him as a content creator all that much, but I have a generally favorable view of him based on the limited stuff that I've seen, although I think we would disagree quite strongly about some things as well. And maybe disagree in a productive way, in a comradely way. But I watch, he puts out little 6-minute videos sometimes, and they are frequently responding to just other idiot shit that people say. He's not an idiot, but Sam Cedar and Vosh sort of have this pseudo-leftist narrative that they propagate, which I'm trying to combat by occupying the same spaces, and someone like Hinkle is attempting to combat directly by, playing the video and responding to it. It's sort of interesting. It looks like nothing so much as it looks like the sort of, Daily Show setup, the old, or like the SNL, whatever it's called, the nightly weekend update, where you have sort of or John Oliver show, or any of these clones, the Stephen Colbert when it was good. I used to really like that show. Now he's obviously trash. but you know, the image is displayed in sort of the upper left-hand corner of the screen, and then you have a talking head who postures like a news person to some degree, talking about it and commenting on this commentary. And then this is the underlying model for a lot of these Twitch streams and a lot of these YouTube videos. I find something, I can't quite put my finger on it, but I find something kind of off-putting about that whole setup. It doesn't, it's not that it isn't serious, it's just that it's not, it seems too far removed from the actual reality of life to be anything other than sort of a gratification project if taken to excess. And so, you know, Hinkle was responding to some bullshit that Bosch had said, calling him a fascist, but you know, and calling Jimmy Dore a fascist. And this looks like an infinite feedback loop to me. Yes, there's a side to this that I prefer, pretty obviously, and yes, I think those lies are best combated. But I don't know. I just sort of think there may be another way to go about this. And so, what's my other way? Well, instead of responding, I mean, I am in the moment, you know, sort of responding to that situation, although I hope I'm doing it in a more abstract and analytical way, you know, thinking about the pattern in general rather than the specifics. So I confess I am doing this thing that I want to stay away from, but I'm trying to do it for a, you know, to demonstrate a point. And then the other thing, the major thing that I want to do to combat this Bolshevikification of the left, if you will, is this what I'm doing? Playing these stupid video games. I shouldn't shit on Minecraft. I really do like it. I've gotten a little bit addicted to it over the past few days, I admit. So as far as video games go, man, this is really just like the best one, I think. So I take back my insult of Minecraft, but I do recognize that it's not a serious thing to do. You know, if that's the best way to put it. It's not you know, it's not writing a white paper for a think tank or something like this. And it's specifically meant to attract a type of audience who is into the Twitch streaming, right? Like, I don't know that if I wrote a... I have a friend in New York who went to grad school with me who's really just a brilliant guy. I think he's probably the smartest person I know. I like him a lot. We don't see eye to eye on politics. But you know, who cares about that when it comes to friendships, especially long-standing friendships? He's someone that it's great to have in my life, and he's a novelist, and he's working on a philosophical novel now in the sort of mold of, you know, Robert Musil or someone like this, right? Some obscure modernist Austrian author, and his you know, his writing skills are quite good, but I do sometimes wonder, somewhat cynically, whether that, you know, whether we've moved beyond that stage of media, I guess, right? Like the novel had its reign. I love novels. I'm an English undergrad major, like that's what my BA is in. And so I don't want to throw novels under the bus, but I don't know if, like, you know, 12 to 22-year-olds are reading novels as much as they are watching streams on Twitch. Obviously, they're doing both. It's a broad class. But the folks who most need to be reached, right, the people who don't already agree with me, maybe in this sort of Bosch space. And yeah, I see, sorry, I'm just bringing up my chat here because it was obscured a little bit. Death Leopards. So just to read the comment, because this will be on YouTube, no one can see the comment then. So Luna Oi, who is, you know, a well-known content creator focusing on, I guess you would say, Vietnamese communism, she was attacked by Bosch about her understanding of dialectical materialism in a video she put out, and he gave no real substantive critique, says Death Leopards. Death Leopards thinks breadtubers like him and others are just there to bring down real left movements. So yes, I agree. And what's so interesting, although now I find now that I'm caught in a trap where I'm talking about the thing I don't want to talk about, but let's explore this idea and then we can move on to other things later. So the claim here that Death Leopards is making in the chat, which I do agree with, I think it's a smart one, that bread tubers like Vosh are there to bring down real left movements. That exact claim is the claim deployed by Vosh against folks like Jackson Hinkle or most likely Luna Oy, certainly Jimmy Dore. And he says that this is a form of either a form of fascism directly, he waffles, or a form of sort of road clearing for fascism. And so there's a certain irony here, I think, and it's telling because this is frequently the case that when there's a wrongdoer, if we could put it that way, when someone's up to no good, they often project exactly the bad thing that they're doing onto someone else and externalize that critique that really should be a self-critique. Of course, Bosch is not in self-critique at all. I hope you'll notice by contrast that I'm constantly sort of trying to qualify my knowledge, like, limit it and add caveats and point out that I'm not speaking from notes and that I'm not an expert in everything. I'm just trying to do my best to have a conversation. I fully expect that look, I'm careful. I don't want to lie and bullshit, but I probably will make mistakes. I try not to make factual mistakes, but I probably will make analytical mistakes. That's part of learning. That's part of what I'm trying to do here. And so I see this little experiment as a chance for others to say, hey, Mysterio, Hellmare, maybe you didn't think about this. Clearly, here's a counterpoint. And I've been persuaded before. If I'm wrong, then I will publicly admit, when I'm wrong and give thanks to those who have corrected me. That is not what Vosh does. What Vosh appears to me to be doing is committing a particular sin and then blaming others for exactly that. Calling Jimmy Dore a fascist is just a little bit absurd to me. Calling Jackson Hinkle, from the little bit I know about him, a fascist just appears obviously absurd. And calling Vosh a fascist, look, it seems like a much better supported claim, although I admit, these low ceilings are terrible, aren't they? I got to do something about that. Although I admit that I'm pretty allergic to just calling people fascists, just like I'm pretty allergic to just saying everyone that disagrees with me is a whatever, a CIA op. Because some people are fascists and some systems are fascist, and some people are working with the CIA and the CIA's influence, or sister intelligence organizations, as we've talked about, their influence is real and broad and dangerous. And so I don't, we all joke about stuff from time to time, but I try not to just make those claims willy-nilly when there's not evidence. And that means I make the claim less often than it is in fact true, right? It's so hard to find a smoking gun. Spies are really good at doing spy stuff, and so catching them out in the open is sometimes difficult. And, even when you do catch them out in the open, because they sometimes brag about it or documents are leaked, it's often difficult to get leftists to give a shit about it, as we talked about on a previous video. Bosch seems to me, though, to be quite open to exactly the criticism that Death Lepers has aptly raised here, and that Bosch himself, ironically, puts out there against others. I don't have a good sense. I mean, I could be operating on a false premise here. I really don't have a great sense of, the target audience of some of these Twitch streamers, the bread tubers and the Voshes of the world, etc. Who else? There's like, I don't know them. I don't really believe they're different people at some level. Like, what's the guy who's Cenk Uyghur's nephew, and then is that one called Haz, or is that one called Hassan? Are those two different people? I don't really know. I bet they're better at Minecraft than I am. I'll probably concede that. And certainly, at this moment, 4 days into my streaming, have larger audiences. Hopefully, we can change that. But I don't know, other than just sort of my conjecture, what the contours of that audience is. Like, is it how old are the people? What's the gender breakdown? What's the socioeconomic background status? Like, I don't know the demographics, but I suspect that it's a lot of younger people, and sometimes probably quite young, 12 years old or something like that. I bet you there are 12-year-olds who watch Vosh. I would not, probably a lot. I don't have the numbers on that, but I see this accusation raised often, and I mean, Minecraft and Zelda and video games, etc., are something that are popular with people of all ages, but younger people especially. And my guess would be it skews male. My guess would be it skews American and certainly, obviously, English speaking. So that's an audience. If I'm right about the facts of that, it's a varied and diverse audience, I'm sure, but not incredibly so. That's an audience that I do think is worth reaching, and that's why I'm doing this sort of stuff. And I don't want them to think I'm just like, spitefully rejecting the nonsense that Vosh is saying or that the other people I just named, who I really don't follow because they turn my stomach, to be quite honest. I can't handle them for more than a few minutes. I don't want them to think I'm just spitefully disagreeing, but I'm probably not going to do the takedowns here because I think I'm not good at that and I'm better at other things. I will sometimes watch those takedowns and refer my meager audience to them, and so I think Jackson Hinkle did a good job of that recently, and it seems to be something he does with some regularity and perhaps as just sort of a mechanism of self-defense. I think there are other views of his that I would find unconvincing at this point. I've never had a conversation with him, so I've yet to be persuaded by some of them, but we could leave that for another time. Good critique is good. Like I don't that we should have disagreement. That's fine. The other thing I mentioned that I wanted to do, and we should, by the way, Death Leopard, I'm bearing the lead here, but we should talk about dialectical materialism, and we should talk about Hegel and Marx and Engels, and I'm not a Maoist, but I think Mao wrote good stuff on dialectics that is worth reading, and we could go on and on with the sort of Socrates was a dialectician, or as represented by Plato. Like that, I wrote my master's thesis and my comprehensive exam on Hegel, so that's on his treatise on law and the state called Philosophy of Right. I've wrote my dissertation on Kant, and so right, who Hegel is responding to. So I do have some knowledge. That shit is really difficult, and I don't know the phenomenology or the logic well, but I do have some knowledge about that stuff. That it's limited in some ways for sure, but I would be happy to use it as a springboard for conversations about some of that stuff. So we should, and I saw some of what Luna Oy put out, and I think she does really interesting and good work, and I would probably in fact, I could think of points of disagreement, but I'm not going to spend time. I'm not going to spend time doing that at the moment. And the disagreement may be my errors rather than hers. What I would do, though, is summarize, like I said, just a bit of what I've been up to, because it's really very weird and perhaps dangerous and foolish to just speak extemporaneously with no notes about very serious and oh, thank you, Death Leopards, who said I'd love to hear your view on dialectics. Yeah, it's a complicated subject. We should talk about it sometime. In a nutshell, I find it a useful, probably the most useful framework for thinking, right? In a broad sense, including Hegel. And the only other frames, that are as useful are probably, the sort of statistical framework of reasoning and inductive reasoning, but this has serious limitations and it has a very overbroad application. And obviously, traditional Aristotelian logic, which I think we'd be kidding ourselves if we claimed that we didn't apply this. And when it comes to Hegel's dialectic in particular, which is in some ways fully well, maybe not fully, but this is incorporated into, or I guess, sublimated into Marx to some degree, although we could talk about how much and where. But just when it comes to Hegel's dialectic, I think that there are some very troubling criticisms of it, and I find Deleuze's approach, Gilles Deleuze, who I mention all the time, to offer sort of the best framework for a criticism of Hegel. But that is very complicated stuff, and I'm not prepared to speak intelligently about it at the moment. Although I'm so it's, I'm taking undergrad classes at the moment to prepare for medical school, and so I'm just basically prepping for the MCAT this next semester, and so I'm taking like what I consider fun, easy classes to give me plenty of time to study. So I'm taking a metaphysics class at the undergrad level starting tomorrow. So I don't know. My guess is it's analytic philosophy. It's not going to give me a lot of the a lot of the dialectics that I want, but it is actually exactly on this subject. So this stuff will be on my mind. I'm sure I will circle back around to it and maybe talk a little bit more about philosophy. In general, it's the thing I care about the most. And if I wind up screwing the dog on medical school, I bomb the MCAT or whatever, it's entirely possible that I'll just try to go teach philosophy or political theory, or I will. I've even considered a few PhD programs in philosophy or economics. So I don't really know what I'll do on that account. But reading and writing, I think, about philosophy is really important to me, and not just political philosophy. So yeah, we should definitely. And if there are Death Leopards, if there are particular texts or authors, or if you have your own take on that you want to share on Twitter or in the chat sometime, I'll read stuff and respond to it. I think that's fun and productive, so just let me know. Now, just to summarize a bit of what I was, what we've covered so far on this channel, we talked a little bit about. I mean, what am I doing? Basically, I'm doing Marxist shit. Do I think Marx was right about everything? No, not really. And we haven't gotten to a point where I've talked about the things that I think are incorrect, if that's the way you want to put it, in Marx. But that'd be and it would be, sort of the most deterministic and dogmatic readings, the stage theory stuff, the necessity of communism and this sort of stuff is where I have my most objections. And some of that is based on how you read Marx and how you read Lenin, etc. But that's a conversation for another day. The conversations we've had so far have been a little bit about Marxist theory, and I am much more inclined, at least in the short term, to talk about economic theory and even to some degree philosophy, but than I am to talk about the political theory because I see a lot of that. But as a Marxist, I find this very odd that most online Marxism would be political in nature rather than economic in nature, because sort of the whole point of Marxism, is that politics are, a superficial byproduct, if you want to put it that way. That's a little bit of an overstatement, but they are epiphenomenal to a large degree to economics, right? And again, that is putting it far too simplistically. You would be right to push back on that framing. But there is a great deal of truth in that. Another way to put it would be, if you're only a Marxist for political reasons and have no economic undergirding to your Marxism, then are you actually a Marxist? Because Marx himself was an economist, right? Like, that's what he spent the majority of his days in his maturity doing, toiling away at a library there in London, reading all the leading political economy of the day and of the prior century, and formulating his ideas on the nature of capitalism. He was also a revolutionary. He was also a philosopher. He definitely wrote about politics, but a lot of the politics that we get out of Marx sort of was emphasized to a higher degree later by folks like Lenin and Stalin and Mao, etc. And what I see, and so maybe online leftism is just sort of, echoing and continuing that trend. But what I see online is almost all political Marxism, and it does lend itself to a bit of the sectarianism that I find so problematic, and doesn't or that all leftists find problem. It's a long-standing problem of the Marxist left that we divide and subdivide continuously, um, sometimes for good reasons, sometimes for not so good reasons. And so I don't I don't like that. And so I don't so starting at that level, starting at the epiphenomenal level, and working backwards to the base seems really just so obviously backwards to me. And so that's why I like to talk more about capital and and you know um, not talk merely about sort of like current trends in Marxist thought. I do think Marx's political writings and Lenin's political writings are extremely good, though, and I love the Civil War in France. I love the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, but I haven't read those texts in a while, even though I do love them. So I'll probably get back to those soon. I've read Civil War in France, several times, but it's really sort of a disorienting and challenging text if you're not familiar with the events of the Paris Commune and the sort of history of France, history of Europe really leading up to that time, because Marx writes in such a, gosh, I don't know how to put it. It's like you already need to. It can't be it's dangerous if that's the first history of the period you read, because it's he writes like you should already know all of the players involved. Oh, I need cobblestone. But he writes really well on account of it. And so we did cover the labor theory of value, and we also covered, what use values and exchange values are. This real basic sort of intro level capital, right, Marxist stuff. And we also spent some time talking about the State and Revolution, which is a reading, Lenin's reading of Marx's reading of the Paris Commune and the events leading up to it and the aftermath. That's obviously a political text. The reason that we did that on this channel was to provide some insight or grounds for critique of contemporary to us, debates on political phenomena, which is sort of the whole point. Like we were doing political theory in the good old-fashioned way. We take some theory, we try our best to interpret those theoretical texts. And that's a project in itself. That's not something that's just done effortlessly. People will disagree. You have to pay careful attention and find a way to navigate those disagreements, between interpretations, but also between your own views and the text. And then we took a look at a number of phenomena that we actually are experiencing now, and I use maybe obsessively use Bernie Sanders as sort of the stand-in for a lot of the problems that the contemporary so-called left in the United States is experiencing. Why? Well, I've already made this point, but these conversations sure do look familiar when you read a little bit of Lenin. Marx to a lesser extent, but not. I mean, you can find descriptions of conservative socialism and bourgeois socialism all the way back in the manifesto, right? Like they're this social democratic trend, which, by the way, social democrats were a Marxist party. A lot of this terminology has shifted. We could do a whole conversation on the changing meanings of communism and socialism, etc., because it gets very confusing, and the way we use these words now, and liberal and conservative as well, the way we use these words now does not line up with the way they were used in Marx's time or Lenin's time, etc., at least not completely. But these tendencies, the sort of Bernie Sanders tendencies, have always been there, and they were a major obstacle, in Lenin's view, to actual worker liberation through the dictatorship of the proletariat, a concept that we haven't spent any time really talking about, except kind of in a sideways manner. And then we also used a bit of the same foundation, right, the economic text in this case, rather than the political text, to highlight some disagreements between Marxism and modern monetary theory. Modern monetary theory being basically a reaction to austerity, which is to say, a social democratic reaction to a conversation had entirely with fiscal conservatives that pretends, in my opinion, sort of like those are the only two people in the room. This is the general problem that I have, I guess, with the so-called liberal left, the progressive left in the United States. And the less you know about politics, the more exacerbated the following problem is. It's that they consistently pose the conversation as though there's no other people in the room, right? It's just either liberal or conservative, and if you disagree with a liberal, you are therefore a conservative. And liberal means left, conservative means right. And this is extremely muddle-headed for reasons that I'm sure, Def Leppard is probably already well aware of, and that folks watching this are probably well aware of. But liberalism is not a left-wing ideology, or at least that's one way to put it. Left liberalism is not the furthest to the left on the political spectrum, or, that's a second way to put it, right? Because Marxism, socialism, etc. is. Or to put it another way, these categories are meaningless, and a united and disciplined, organized force of workers would transcend and exceed the boundaries of. I really want some more diamonds. I guess I'll just have to take these other ones. Better to just get them for now, I guess. Maybe it's stupid. 2, 3. But a mass worker movement would, the politics of left and right really come to us from the French Revolution and establish new categories that we're still sort of stuck in. So you could imagine a new revolutionary, a world revolutionary, transformative moment that established new political vocabulary, new political categories as well. And this fundamental transformation is beyond the scope of the imagination, beyond the horizon of possibility in the in the uncritically examined thoughts of the average liberal or the average conservative, which, if you take at least one of those readings I just laid out, are basically two types of liberal, right? Liberals with progressive social values call themselves liberals, and liberals with conservative social values call themselves conservatives. But there ain't much daylight between them. And so I'm definitely gonna get fortune on this. It's just gonna happen because I can always get a silk touch, or I can combine these before I have mending. No, I don't want that. So I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that. What is the point I'm trying to make? It's so hard to stay focused when I'm really trying to get these goddamn Minecraft things to fall in line too, The point I want to make is that the conversation in America seems fucked on a number of dimensions. And those of us who are actually trying to, how can I put this in a way that's not immediately censored? Those of us who find compelling, but only hypothetically and theoretically, the text in which the abolition of the bourgeois state is estimated to be the best course for workers, right? If you think that's a very good theoretical and totally fictional read, then you are left with very limited options in contemporary political debate. And you're not going to find it at the national level, and you're not going to find it at the YouTube level. The other topic that we touched upon was, and I think this is related, it's a theme that keeps coming back time and time again, is the sort of unwillingness of those, even many who would co-sign all the statements I just made above, right? Like the real Marxists out there, even those folks have an unwillingness to assess the degree to which narrative management and manipulation by intelligence agencies is a hindrance to the progress of left movements in the United States. And just like with the idea of actually being a Marxist, going out and telling your liberal colleague at work, no, I'm a fucking for real communist, like Marxist Leninist or Maoist or whatever, whatever your flavor is. Although, obviously I only think there's, really just a handful or maybe just one legit flavor. But leaving that aside, um, you tell that to someone and they're going to look at you like you're crazy 9 times out of 10. Right? We wish this were more quote unquote normalized, to use sort of the hideous language of the day. Um, but similarly, if you tell a so-called Marxist, hey, I think that the CIA is probably concerned about radical organizations and radical speech in the United States and is well equipped to alter our channels of communication, then you're likely to get the same raised eyebrows that the liberal would give those people when they said, hey, I'm a Marxist. Um, so I find that really problematic. So that was the other theme we talked about. And floating underneath the surface of all of this, or I guess floating upon the surface of all of this, is the idea, I keep coming back to it, the idea that our impression of an image of a phenomenon has replaced the thing itself, right? Let's use our Kantian language, right? The phenomena are taken to be the noumenon, right? The thing in itself is forever lost. The authentic thing, to get back to the sort of Hemingway language, right? Or, honestly, probably even the Heideggerian language, the authenticity is entirely lost. The real is entirely not a Lacanian real, but just a commonsensical sort of real is obfuscated. And you see this in MMT. You see it in the circulation, the feedback loop I was describing in online spaces. You see this in the obsession with sectarian identities or identities in general among the liberals, but sectarian identities among the so-called Marxists. And you see it with the avoidance of all things economic in nature. I don't, it's not. It is pathological. I think it is. It is an error, and it is a victory of the forces of reaction over the forces of liberation, for sure. But it is also at the same time just really understandable because everything is digital now, right? It's hard to even understand value in a world where, Facebook, which doesn't, it's not like they don't make furniture or food or clothing. They circulate images. And like I was saying in regard to MMT, we're off the gold standard. So talking about money as a commodity appears ludicrous to many people, although I think it's a broad discussion, but there may be reason to be quite concerned if you don't think money has any, um, attachment to the real world, because I think it quite obviously does, not only as a commodity, but also as an expression of imperialist might. Like, that's what makes fiat currency possible, as we talked about in the other video. And, we could talk about the way that this image over substance, which is a common critique you see even within sort of like media critiques, right? The Kardashianization of America. We could talk about the way all of this is constantly inundating us, our screened lives. And at the same time, I think we could turn back to some of the analysis of the very sort of young revolutionary Marx and Engels gave us in the Communist Manifesto, where, and I think this passage is really overlooked, and I know some people do work on this idea, but I think it's a crucial one, that, the conditions of possibility, again, forgive my Kantian talk, but that which makes possible class consciousness in the theory, right? I guess you may say to some degree refuted theory of the Communist Manifesto is, or includes the very special arrangements of labor, the very special material, physical, and social arrangements of labor. And just to give a obvious and crude example of this, Marx and Engels in Communist Manifesto point out that the demands of capital actually that capital puts on workers, on the proletariat, the industrial laborers in the cities, actually foster their self-organization, right? It demands a certain quality of life that's above just the bare subsistence. It demands pretty wide and high rates of literacy, and it demands sort of working in close cooperation, shoulder to shoulder with others in a common project in the factories. And so some of those elements we still have. Obviously, literacy rates are even higher. But the close coordination, the factory lifestyle, is something that we do not have to a high degree, perhaps in the bomb-making factories, But for those of us who work in knowledge sectors, or who work remotely, even who go to school remotely now, which is a subject I'd like to touch on in a future video, distance learning and COVID and the transformation of the university, etc. But for those of us who are not working in traditional factory jobs, if that was what made class consciousness possible, how does being an Uber driver, for example, right, or a Grubhub, or a dog walker in your free time, or working on OnlyFans, or any number of these other, or even somewhat traditional jobs now that have been transformed in their nature, like even the factory jobs have an increasing amount of surveillance and automation and disruption to the material conditions, a possibility for the formation of class consciousness, right? Like working in an Amazon warehouse. Are you in there's evidence either way, right? That may be one of the examples where you can find some signs of class consciousness, because it is, the warehouse setting is closer to a factory setting in the ways that Marx described. But even there are serious problems with just being able to get together and form a union, right? As I don't need to probably tell anyone who's listening to this. So I hope you see the point I'm hinting at here, which is we've taken the concept of class consciousness and divorced it from its material conditions of production, which is anti-Marxist. This is anti-materialist. It's anti-dialectical. It's obviously idealist, and we don't need to despair. It's not that we need to question what the possibilities are in our current arrangement of the forces of production, if you see what I mean. Like, what possibilities are opened up by this arrangement of working class bodies and minds, and equally importantly, what options are now foreclosed, and maybe need to be abandoned, or may need to be reopened by force, right? By will, if you like. And I don't have, those are questions I'm posing. I don't think I'm the first one to pose them, but I do think they are important ones. I apologize if that's too obscure. I hope you get the gist of what I'm saying, at least, as I go ahead and kind of wrap up here for the day. So we didn't find any diamonds. We didn't get to enchant any, but we did expand the mine some, and I got to show off my house a little bit and just gathered some resources. I have a ton of deep slate over here now, which I love to build with. So I will build a big circular, like 3 or 4 story storage room out of a variety of these different deep slates, and we'll get some dyed glass over there too. So I think that I kind of have that with a nice domed roof, and maybe use some spruce in it. I have that image in my mind, and then that will allow us to start connecting up some buildings with some paths. And we'll put some decoration up here. It'd be nice. I wish I could find an axolotl or something like that, so I could put him up here in an aquarium. But that may be a bridge too far right now. Find another dog and breed those, and find some cats, find a village. Oh, I also did this, which is kind of cool. So maybe we'll end the episode up here. Love to hear your thoughts, anyone watching this. I stream every day at 7 p.m. Something's on fire out there. I stream every day at 7 p.m. Central, and I post these videos to YouTube. You can just find me on Twitter at Mysterio1870 if you are interested in any of those links, or join us in the chat. So much more fun with someone around, but you know me, I'll probably just keep on doing it anyways. So thanks, comrades. Please let me know your thoughts on anything I've said. Sorry if it's rambling. That's just sort of the fault of the format and the fault of the speaker. So I look forward to our next meeting tomorrow at 7 p.m. Y'all take care.